Hello, everyone. We have two special guests today who are here to talk about HIM's recent acquisition of ZAVA, both experts on European healthcare, and one of whom is a repeat guest. But before we get into the episode, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our flagship sponsor, Godel Terminal. People have tried to build a Bloomberg killer for years, but I think Godel might actually pull it off. They're just getting started, but what they've already built delivers 90% of Bloomberg's functionality at less than 10% of the price. It's a full trading terminal for $80 a month. I use it daily to track short interest, institutional ownership, analyst ratings, and more. If you want access to the data powering HIM's house, sign up today and get 25% off your first month. The link to sign up and get that deal is in the show notes below. Here is our conversation with Mads Christiansen and Sekander Amini. HIM's House, episode 35. My name is Jonathan Stern. I'm here as always with Patrick Lester, who goes by the name Bayside in the HIM's House Discord. We have two special guests today. First up, Sekander Amini. Sekander runs a private pharmacy in the UK and is a longtime HIM's investor. Now, many of you, I'm sure, will remember Sekander from episode 10, Healthcare in the UK. Our viewers consistently rank that episode as among their favorite HIM's House episodes of all time. So we're excited to have you back today. Our second guest is Mads Christiansen, founder and CEO of New Deal Invest, a tech and growth-focused investment fund based in Denmark. Mads is also a general practitioner, so he brings both a tech and medical perspective to this conversation. As I mentioned last week, I was committed to bringing on a couple European healthcare experts to discuss HIM's acquisition of ZAVA in greater depth. So that's exactly what we'll be doing today. Sekander, Mads, welcome to HIM's House.
Thank you,
for having me.
It's a pleasure.
I want to start with something that Mads wrote to me in an email a few days ago. It was an attempt, I think, to boil down how HIM's experience in Europe is likely to differ from its experience in the US. Mads said, in the US, HIM's competes against non-consumption. In Europe, it will compete against free healthcare. Walk us through what you meant by that.
Yeah, it's an old Clayton Christensen concept where it's nice to have a new product where you're not really competing against anybody. You call that competing against non-consumption. And the classic example is when Sony started selling transistor radios in the States. Everybody had a vacuum tube radio standing in the middle class homes. But Sony came with this shitty low-end transistor radio with poor sound, but it had a battery and it was cheap, so it opened up the product for new consumers, which were young people hanging out at the parking lot and consuming music that way. So that creates a lot of growth, and that's been a part of HIM's story in the States, that they are able to enable people that hasn't been able to have a doctor for certain diseases to actually have a doctor, and that's one way of growing. And then you have in Europe, you'll have people actually having a doctor. Everybody in Europe has a doctor. It's free. You get that over the tax bill, so you have a doctor. So they'll be in a totally different spot in Europe. And yeah, one of the things I think one should think about is that now we see how HIM's and Hers is in the state where the market is like this, and now they're going into a different location. So we might see another product mix and another core product. So I think HIM's is a company digitizing the healthcare system. And in the States, this was the way to go to market. And we can talk a lot about this later, but going into a market that is different than the company digitizing the healthcare value chain in in that region might be somewhat different in what it would be offering.
Jonathan, were you thinking about sharing those Google Trends numbers? Because
Yeah,
I think this
I
is
just got
illustrative.
that. Sorry about the beep. I just X'd out of that.
No worries.
I'm happy to share the Google Trends numbers.
I think it's relevant to what we're about to ask about. So I think this would be a good spot to throw those up.
You want me to bring those up right now?
Yeah. Is that doable? I can ask the question if it takes you a second.
Yeah. Let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. Feel free to start asking, Patrick.
Okay. So I want to dig into the topic for both of you, Sekander and Mads. I guess we'll start with you, Sekander, first. And it's on this issue of competing with free healthcare. Now, that was one of my initial concerns. You guys are both in Europe. But this is my understanding. I understand that I'm talking to people who both live in Europe, so you can feel free to correct me. My understanding is that while healthcare may be generally free for things that are considered medically necessary, that is not true for so-called lifestyle medical issues, which might include some of the categories that HIMSS is traditionally focused on. For example, weight loss, hair loss, erectile dysfunction, although there's a little bit of an exception for the last one in the UK, and Sekander, you can talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But my understanding is that generally those kinds of conditions are generally not covered by the public health insurance. Private health insurance would depend on your coverage, but generally speaking, it seems like those things are not covered there either. So that would seem to be a big issue. And before you answer, one of the reasons why I asked Jonathan to share screen is it kind of speaks to this issue that if there's a public sector you're comparing with, it might seem that it'd be a pretty tough road to grow. And yet ZAVA appears to be doing just that. Before I get an answer from Sekander, then Mads on this question, did you want to run through those numbers or share your screen, Jonathan, just so we can see what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so you want me to, we have the ZAVA worldwide past 5 years chart, and you can see we're trending up from, this is a score from 1 to 100, call it around 20 2 years ago to in the 50, 60 range now. I think I think we spiked last week on account of the acquisition. So I'd sort of roll that out. And as you can see, we're trending back down. But we're in
and
the
that's
50,
worldwide.
So this is worldwide. So this is 3x. Now, I've also pulled up UK since, I don't know, Q2 2024. ZAVA has really taken off, it would appear, in the UK. And then here in Germany, steady growth, but 2024 into 25 apparently has been very big. And then France, the third largest market for ZAVA, sort of flatline, but my understanding is they're a pretty big player in France. So I'd like to maybe get into that. Is that what you wanted me to share?
Yeah, you did just what I wanted. So the reason why I wanted to run through those numbers, I mean, we could get financials. Ideally, that would be better, but this gives us a sense. So from an American point of view, a concern might be, well, Europe, the healthcare is free. How on earth does this even make sense? And yet it seems like, and this is where I'm looking for an answer. I'm going to start with you, Sekander, first. It seems like in the specialized area of medicine, the rules are a little different and there is a pathway to growth. So let me ask you first, Sekander, what you think about that. I'll turn to Mads second.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So in the UK, we have the NHS, the National Health Service, and it does offer free healthcare, but it's not completely free. I'll get to what parts people need to pay for. But what tends to happen is when you offer a free service, people overuse it or abuse it. So what happens in the UK is people who have minor cold or a cough or a headache, they go and see the doctor, and that takes up the doctor's time. So if it's someone coming in for other conditions like mental health, hair loss, erectile dysfunction, etc., they're kind of pushed aside because the doctor has so many patients to see. They want to prioritize the patients with complications like diabetes or hypertension. So what happens with these patients that have these conditions, hair loss, ED, the conditions that HIMSS are treating, is they're left to wait for weeks on end. And if they happen to get an appointment to see the doctor, the conversation will last around 10 minutes, and the doctor is not specialized in that field. So they won't be a dermatologist, they won't be an endocrinologist, They'll just use a cookie cutter method, see, oh, this is the guidelines, I'm going to give you this. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for the patient. So what tends to happen if patients get these things through free healthcare, it may not end up working as well. And they still have to pay for it. So even though seeing the doctor is free, when you go and collect your medication, there's still a fee for that, which is around £9.90. There are exemptions for people who are over 65 or under 16, or if you're getting help from the government, but you still have to pay for it. So if something like HIMS, a telehealth platform, which charges around £20 a month, that's roughly how much I pay for my subscription to HIMS. You're getting personalized treatments, which not much difference in price.
Mads, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, kind of the same. If you go back to see how our system is created, it's doctors and regulators or the official sector that determines which diseases do we treat and how do we treat them. And you want to have something that is really based on science, that you can do a double-blind test and know that here you create whatever you think is valuable. And this is one of the places where what's valuable from the person's perspective, from the patient's perspective, might be different than what regulators and doctors think is right or is reasonable. Durham talks a lot about being a customer-centric platform, and this is really where this kicks in, that you want to treat what people want to get treated, and they will pay for that. So weight loss is a good example, but really testosterone deficiency is a really good example as well, because it's something that is there and people talk about it, and do I have this? I feel kind of tired and non-energized, and the doctors are like, well, we can't make sure that there is effect for the tax dollars, so we're not going to offer it. If you look at menopause, which is also coming on, there'll be the doctor's perspective. What do I think is reasonable? Do I think it's reasonable to postpone menopause a little bit, and in return I increase my risk of breast cancer a little bit? And that will be the systems and the doctor's perspective. So there is really lots of room for these a little bit gray zone, not in a negative way, but just in another perspective, verticals to be a starting point. And I think HIMS is really well suited to just to go in and use these verticals, applying or offering treatment for that. And it will be a gray zone, but it will also be healthy for the European system to have somebody addressing what people are really looking for. We have alternative treatment that people have been going to all the time, because they have some other needs than the system can offer. And I think AI is going to sort of make the time faster for treatments to be documented, or at least for doctors to have a good idea of this could potentially help. Doing a double-blind test of everything is a very long. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So yeah, there's definitely lots of opportunities there to come in that space.
We're definitely going to come back to the AI question.
Okay.
But
I just want to add one more point to answer Patrick's question properly.
Yes.
So does the free healthcare cover these conditions? So if, for example, someone wants to prevent hair loss, the doctor might turn them down. If they're already balding, then they might be like, okay, I'll prescribe it to you. Right. So not all the time, because as Mads mentioned, that these doctors this is being paid by the taxpayer, so that they don't want to be dishing out medication to everyone. Even if they still need it, they might get turned down. But yeah, you still can get these medications prescribed through free healthcare, but not weight loss. You won't be able to get GLP-1s because the government's not gonna. That's way too expensive.
Well, let me shift on this. Although my one comment if you can give me a really quick answer, is it seems to me, again, as someone who's not in Europe, that you need to potentially separate out both the cost of the doctor visit versus the cost of the medications, whereas the HIMSS model is an all-in-one package. That it sounds like that might matter. Who pays for what? So I wouldn't have a ton of time for that question, but Sekander, what you're thinking on that? Is there some separation there? Is there opportunity on one versus the other versus all in one?
Yeah, so with private healthcare, the cost of the doctor is covered by the government, and the medication is covered by the government as well, but the patient does contribute a small amount. It's capped at £9.90. But in private healthcare, the traditional method is you pay for the doctor's fee separately, which is extremely high because doctors have a high salary. It's around 100 to £150 just for the consultation. And then you pay for the medication separately. And this is why I'm so bullish on HIMSS, is because they package it as one cost, as a monthly subscription, something that's affordable, say like £25 a month, £30 a month. Most people could afford that. But if someone booking an appointment with a doctor and initially having to pay 150 and they don't know what they're getting,
Right.
then they might be turned off by that.
Right.
So with HIMSS, I think the opportunity here is when they get economies of scale, when they have so many subscribers on their platform and their doctors are constantly having these consultations, then they could still have, they could be extremely profitable while the patients pay less.
Okay. We have a couple of more regulatory questions, then we'll push on beyond this topic. But one important one is advertising. Now, fundamental to the HIMSS model, I mean, they've traditionally over the past several years have averaged as much as 50% or more of revenue spent on advertising. That's something that can work in the United States. We're a little bit unique in that regard. I think the only other country that I'm aware of that allows free advertising of that allows advertising of pharmaceuticals that way is New Zealand. To my knowledge, there are very different rules in Europe. How do you anticipate that HIMSS is going to address marketing in a European environment? I got to start with you, Mads, first on this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to take time. I think that this acquisition is not going to do anything material to the HIMSS story for a long time. I think they'll enter Europe, and Europe is lots of different countries with different regulations, different hurdles that need to be overcome. And it's going to take a lot of time, and they're going to have to take each country by itself and figure out how to get to market there. There's a certain some rules and legislation, and figuring out how to get to the customers in the end. And I think the end customer can be different. You could see the healthcare systems of the state procuring from HIMSS and hers if they are able to offer something which is cost effective and alternative. The Danish healthcare system procures from the private system services. So you could see that as an outfall. You could see insurance companies being the buyer of services from HIMSS and hers, and you could also see the patients being the buyers. So there'll be different routes in different countries to go to. But yeah, you can't advertise for this. But HIMSS also has adjacent things. They have a platform where you can advertise for other things. Come for healthy food advice, or come for health advice, something like that. Get people on the platform. So there'll be various routes for acquiring patients. But it's going to take time, just a lot of time. And I think HIMSS is the right one for that, because they generate a lot of cash now already in the States. So doing this for a European startup would be so hard, because time to market and just the knowing that you'll get to market will be hard in this and this and this country. So having cash and also having a brand that people talk about is going to be a huge tailwind for HIMSS, and can make it possible for HIMSS not to advertise in Europe, but be advertised on the Super Bowl or stuff like that. So you don't you do it in the back route. So yeah.
Let me go. Jonathan, you may have a follow-up, so go ahead. But I wanted to ask Sekander a really quick question.
Yeah, go for it. Pat.
Okay, super fast. So one of the reasons why I had Jonathan show those numbers, the Google Trends numbers, is because it would be easy to listen to this and go, "Wow, this is going nowhere fast," and yet ZAVA clearly is an upward trend. They are managing to grow in that environment. So I think it's important to remember that. Sekander, the question for you is again, time, because we have so many questions, so make it quick. To my knowledge, you run a pharmacy in the UK.
Correct.
So how do you deal with the regulations on marketing for your business?
Yeah, so speaking on behalf of the UK is one of the only other countries where HIMS is currently operating, apart from the US. And actually, when I'm on the train to work, I see people on their phones on Instagram and they're getting ads for HIMS. So Andrew Dudum, he's super smart. He's not gonna break the rules or anything, but you can advertise if you do it the correct way. So I believe you can't name specific medications, so GLP-1 injections or finasteride, but you can say telehealth, hair
They did
loss
that
treatment.
for the Super Bowl, by the way.
Yeah, and they got away with it.
Yeah.
So I think HIMS is smart enough to be able to get their brand across, but in a legal way. Because I'm already seeing HIMS ads already on the train in the UK. That seems to be no issue. So as long as they're not naming the medication and they're just saying that they offer a telehealth platform, there's no issue at all. And I see competitors adverts as well. There's two main ones in the UK, Newman and Manual, which we'll get to later on.
All right, I'm kicking this back to Jonathan. Only my last one sentence comment is simply that it does appear that Europe is encouraging of telehealth. So maybe that matters. Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted real quickly to understand what is and what isn't allowed in terms of advertising. So Instagram, Facebook, I would imagine Google, those are allowed as long as HIMS is not marketing specific pharmaceuticals, as long as they pitch it in a sort of telehealth way. What about TV, radio? Are there any differences in terms of what's allowed?
I don't think there'll be any differences as long as HIMS aren't advertising specific drugs and medications. It should be totally fine. And I'm actually seeing HIMS initially grew in New York, if you guys remember, before they went public, on the train stations in New York. I think they will do very well in the UK because UK and American culture is quite similar, and I think HIMS's quirky branding will do really well in the UK. And I've actually seen there was this other company, I think I took a picture of it. They had this ambiguous marketing saying telehealth weight loss treatments, but they didn't have anything else, just that on the train station. So I think HIMS can do it legally, advertise their business.
We should have gotten the HIMS UK trend because they have been in the United Kingdom, as Sekander said.
Yeah.
In any case, let me pull it up here. Past 5 years.
Let's see what it looks
While
like.
you get that up, I found something interesting.
Yeah.
So HIMS is only doing just for the HIMS sector in the UK, not for HAS. Even since they started, the HIMS website hasn't changed much. It's just ED and hair loss. But I checked the forhas.co.uk domain. There's no website, but it's taken already. So maybe HIMS was cooking something.
Which one? Hers.co.uk or forhers.co.uk?
Forhas.co.uk.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Because HIMS still does not have a hers offering in the UK. Is that right?
No. And the offerings haven't changed much. So in the US, they've got all these compounded acne treatments and weight loss and mental health. In the UK, they've just stuck to two things, ED and hair loss. But that makes sense because Andrew, he was focused on growing the US business.
Great. So, okay, I'm glad we double clicked into some of this advertising stuff. I have a clear picture of what's allowed in the UK. Is this true of Germany and France as well? Do you know, Sekander or Mad, the telehealth versus exact drugs advertising?
Me, I could speak on behalf of the UK. I'm not sure about Germany and France. Ireland would be similar to the UK.
Do you know?
Yeah, I think it will be different from country to country. And it's also important to remember that you might start competing with other parts of the system, even though it's not a it's not a private sector you're competing with or private company. You'll still find adversaries in the established system, because HIMSS will be competing with their jobs. So there'll be some resistance from the incumbents, whoever they are. So once you're not competing against non-consumption, you're taking somebody else's clients or doing something that somebody else might care about. So they'll have to move. They'll have to move carefully. But in Denmark, we have private clinics marketing their services as well, like Sekander is talking about. So there will be rules about what you can and what you can't say.
Got it. I want to move to the topic of cross-border shipments. It's the case in the United States that HIMSS has, a big part of the thesis is that HIMSS has vertically integrated the operation. So they own pharmacies, they compound their own drugs, and they ship those to pretty much all 50 states. Now, each state, there are some cases where I think it was Massachusetts just introduced this law or that law, and so they've started to crack down, and they're not quite able to ship to all 50 states in exactly the same way. But it's mostly the case that they can ship cross-border in the 50 United States. If HIMSS were to buy a pharmacy in Europe, let's say they bought a compounding pharmacy in the Netherlands or in Germany, do we have any sense for what the regulations are for whether HIMSS could legally ship the drugs from that pharmacy to the rest of the EU? Or if they want to vertically operate in Europe, are they going to have pharmacies in each country in which they want to operate?
In my opinion, it would be easier for them to have their own compounding pharmacy in each country, because we do get medication imported in from other countries, but I believe there's some sort of fee that needs to be paid, which might eat into margins. So I think what HIMSS would do, they would vertically integrate in each separate country.
Got it. Do you have a sense for that, Mads?
No, I would tend to agree. We sometimes run out of medication in Denmark, and we have to parallel import it from like Germany or something like that, and it gets a little bit cumbersome for the system and for the doctors. So, yeah, I would agree with that it had to be vertically integrated in all the countries. But I also think that I don't think it necessarily needs to be the same platform in the Europe as it is in the States. I think we should think of them as just digitizing the healthcare value chain, and we could see them making a model for Germany, and a model for France, and a model for Denmark, and figuring out which is the core offering that fits that market and the incumbents that you have in that market, and then build from there. Naturally, if you vertically integrate, you have advantages in that way, also data advantages. So that would be the optimal state, but I think it's a long build.
And also, I've done some deeper digging into the UK operations. They actually they're not vertically integrated in the UK HIMSS. For example, here's my HIMSS's medication, and on the box at the bottom, small print, it says dispensed by specialist pharmacy. And I've done some deeper research. Specialist pharmacy, they are a compounding pharmacy, but they're agnostic. So any clinic could go to them and they would compound on their behalf. And with ZAVA, I checked. Jonathan, you mentioned that they don't have a pharmacy. I believe they do have a pharmacy, but they're not a compounding pharmacy. So they just order medication from the suppliers, similar to my pharmacy. So they do have a pharmacy, but it's not a compounding pharmacy.
You're saying ZAVA owns the pharmacy, or ZAVA is partnered with the pharmacy?
So ZAVA is a platform which has doctors and also has a pharmacy, like an in-house pharmacy, similar to mine. Like, I'll show you downstairs, but it's probably really busy. We order medication from suppliers, and they send us the branded medication, which is what's on ZAVA's website. So they have like a normal pharmacy, high street. So they probably have like a bigger version of that, like a wholesale pharmacy, but they're ordering stuff and then dispensing it and shipping it out to patients, but they're not manufacturing it. But HIMSS in the UK, they're outsourcing their manufacturing to another compounding pharmacy called Specialist Pharmacy.
Got it. Okay. I want to turn to the topic of compounding and personalization. HIMSS has recently been, the final thing on the topic of regulation, probably. HIMSS has recently been pushing a product that may test some limits. They have these 4-in-1 and 5-in-1 multi-ingredient, it's like personalized sex plus hair loss pills, right? I posted something on Twitter, 4-in-1 sex plus hair loss, 5-in-1 sex plus hair loss. Crazy idea. You know, certain people online are now calling HIMSS the Willy Wonka company. Is this the sort of thing that's allowed in Europe? Is there any chance that this is going to get transported across the ocean?
Did you want to answer, Mads? Or?
No, I think that's your topic.
Okay. In the UK, they're already offering a 2-in-1, not 4-in-1 yet. They're offering the finasteride and minoxidil mix. I believe as long as they have documentation that the patient suffers from these conditions, then yes, they can supply these to the patients. Because we work with other pharmacies who use compounding pharmacies, and as long as the patient has certain conditions and they need these different ingredients, then they can compound it into one. There's no issue.
So the marketing is certainly pushing some limits, but in terms of the drug itself, no problems. As long as the patient requires it.
Exactly.
Mads?
Yeah, I think that would probably provoke a lot of people in Denmark if you had a product like that. I think they'll, but it's the balance of being interesting and innovating, creating new stuff, and then also being a somebody people think they can rely on. If you want to take a medication, you want to feel that it's something that you can rely on. And I think at least in Denmark, that would just be too provoking for the incumbents and for the entire system. I can imagine the news articles that would be written about the Willy Wonka treatment created by HIMSS and hers, and I think that would be a poor start. That would be my advice for Denmark, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of gets us into the topic of consumer behavior and the differences in appetite across, European versus the United States. And it just may be the case that consumers in the United States are willing to take drugs like that, 4-in-1, 5-in-1, to a greater extent than people in Europe. But is the population of Denmark more conservative in terms of healthcare than Americans? Is that your sense?
Yeah, I don't know how the American system is. I think you should just conclude that it will be different from what you know from the States, and it will take a different solution. When you look at startups and new companies coming in, they in the tech history, we don't know how the product is going to look and where the product market fit is going to look. And I think HIMSS and hers has a whole selection of products and verticals and solutions that they can combine for each country, so they can make the Willy Wonka HIMSS and hers solution for Denmark and for France. And like when Apple launched the App Store, it was closed and it was meant to be vertically integrated. And then 9 months later, they tried to open it up for external providers, and suddenly everything went wild. And when we're talking about whether they need to have a pharmacy, there's no sort of predetermined route that they have to follow. They can collaborate with a pharmacy in Germany, and they can have their own pharmacy in England, and they can have hair treatment in England, and they can do weight loss in Germany. So and that's why I think HIMSS and hers is just the right solution, because they have the scale on their tech stack, on their data, and they have the cash to do this cumbersome work in each country, tailoring the right solution. And I think that's what they bought with ZAVA. They bought a team that is in these countries and has already established something, and then they can work from there.
That's a nice segue to the next question, I think. What do you?
Yeah,
So I'm going to ask. So we've been kind of hammering both of you guys on the reality in Europe since you know it and we do not, and a lot of that sounds like challenges. We talked about a bit of that. I want to shift gears and really start looking at the positive. And this one's a bit of an open question. And since I know, at least I think I know, Mads, from some of the things you said, you're going to probably want to circle back to that AI question because there's some future-oriented stuff that I would actually like to tee up in another question or two. So you'll have another bite at that particular apple. But I really want to talk about the synergies. We talked about the challenges. I want to get into the synergies that, from your point of view, that really drove this deal. I'll start with you, Mads, because you were just talking about a little bit of that. And then I'll turn to Sekander second.
Synergies with ZAVA.
Yes, synergies with ZAVA, correct.
Yeah. So I think Hims and Hers has I talked about just the cash generation that Hims has, and I think startup investors in Europe, everybody talks about we need to get startups, we need to raise cash and fund startups, and we need to keep them once they grow big. But what happens is they end up in the States, all of them, and that's because scaling in Europe is really hard. So I think that could have been ZAVA's problem, that you need to have an investor that will keep funding the route. And you need to be able to try this and figure out that didn't work, and then go back, reorientate, and try that, and then until you figure out, then you try opening up the App Store for external developers, and boom, you have it. But if you don't have the time for it and the money and to do it, then it will be difficult. So I think Hims comes with that for ZAVA. Then they come with the tech stack, which is good. They come with the experience. They have the experience on the verticals, and yeah, I think they have this bandit mentality, like they are this cool new thing that does what everybody else is sort of like, oh no, I don't want to touch that, or is that right, or is that, and they focus on being consumer centric. I think the way they managed this GLP-1 whole story was just phenomenal. So I just think that's what the European startup needs, is a big brand that comes with that. And then they have the AI advantage. They have a lot of data in advance. You'll need local data to be able to do tailored treatment in Europe. And that's really a huge opportunity, because the one that has the most data is going to be able to make the most or the best tailored treatments for the patients in Europe. And I don't think any of the incumbents are really gathering a lot of data the way that Hims is going to be. So just by being in the countries and being willing to not do a fantastic business is going to enable them to create a data set that will be a huge advantage for the long term. He likes to compare with Amazon, right? And Amazon built Amazon Web Services. The investors were crying over the costs for Amazon Web Services for like 5-10 years, and suddenly it's this amazing blossoming business. And I think that Europe can be that as well, because it's very difficult, but doing something difficult is very attractive because you get it to yourself.
Sekander, synergies from your point of view.
Yes, of course. So when I saw this acquisition, I tried to put myself into Andrew's shoes. So why would he acquire this company when they're already operating in the UK? Why would they acquire another company that's also operating in the UK? Of course, in Germany and France as well. But when I've done some deeper digging, it comes down to Hims in the UK. They don't own the compounding pharmacy. They just have the online platform, and then they use a third-party compounding pharmacy to dispense their medications and create the compounded medication. But recently, I shared it in the group chat before this.
Yeah.
On the day before the ZAVA acquisition, it was in talks before. On the 2nd of June, the UK announced that they will no longer be accepting applications for pharmacies that want to sell at a distance. So, in other words, telehealth, direct-to-consumer pharmacies. And HIMSS doesn't have the license for that because they're using a third-party provider. So this move maybe so they could have the license to direct to consumer compounding medication in the UK and also in the other countries. And when you think about the other acquisitions that Andrew Duden made, so Honest Health initially and Apostrophe, they both no longer exist as their own brands. They're all under HIMSS's brand now. So I think that's what's going to happen with ZAVA. ZAVA, I don't know how long it will take. It will no longer exist anymore. HIMSS will use their platform, their infrastructure, their licenses, and their fleet of doctors and their subscribers to provide their own compounded medication, because that's the USP, the unique selling point for HIMSS is their compounding and customization. What ZAVA has right now on their platform, I'll be honest, isn't anything special. Like my pharmacy provides a similar service, and we didn't have much capital to provide that sort of service. What will change the game is compounding. So I think HIMSS is buying the right to license to provide telehealth medication. And and they'll leverage the subscribers that are already on ZAVA.
One quick follow-up, and then I'll kick it to Jonathan. So what I heard you say was strategic acquisition. There are some potential barriers to entry, at least in the UK, on the timing of that announcement. But just being there, presence is certainly a synergy, and being up and running as opposed to trying to create stuff from ground zero.
Of course.
One quick, I mean, there's some other things in there. They have certainly some revenue. They may or may not be profitable. There's this one thing, and maybe you can talk about it. Maybe if you don't have much to add, that's fine. I'll kick it to Jonathan. But supposedly, ZAVA has 1.3 million active users, whatever that might be. I suspect it's a telehealth subscription, but we'll see. Whatever it is not producing the same revenue per subscriber that HIMSS currently gets. But what does that presence look like? I mean, tell me a little. I mean, maybe you don't have anything to add on that, but what value might there be in that?
I think there is value.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I think there is value in that because if they're providing these patients with, say, hair loss treatments or ED, if HIMSS then offers them their own compounded medication customized for them, then that's already generating higher margin revenue, in my opinion.
Mads, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, it's a very small business, and so I think it's mostly about the rails that, like Sekander talked about, that's what you're acquiring. You are acquiring a quicker route to the market.
That sounds like it. All right, but kicking it back to you, John.
I just want to make sure I understand the implications of what Sekander was saying around DSP. And again, DSP stands for what, Sekander?
Sorry, let me just get it.
The long
distance selling pharmacies.
Go on, yeah.
So on the 2nd of June, the UK announced that they will no longer be accepting any new applications for distance selling pharmacies. And there's only in the UK, there's 408 distance selling pharmacies. And HIMSS wasn't one of those because they were using it. No, it does not. Yeah.
But ZAVA does. Is that right?
ZAVA does. Yes, correct.
Okay. And this distance selling pharmacy will allow ZAVA to do what that HIMSS cannot currently do?
So to directly to provide telehealth services and then send the medication to the patient. If that makes sense. Because HIMSS does that.
I guess I thought HIMSS was already doing that in the UK.
But they're using someone else. They're using specialist pharmacy. They're using their license, distance selling license.
This allows them to do it pretty much entirely in-house. Is that right?
Exactly. So I think HIMSS will acquire a compounding pharmacy in the UK, and it will allow them to compound anything they want. For example, the 4-in-1 or whatever. They could experiment as much as they want. But with specialist pharmacy, because it's a third-party compounding facility, they may not be as flexible. They may not listen to what Hims wants to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm happy I asked for clarification there. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to dig into this a little bit more
Yeah.
afterwards. Okay, here's something I wanted to ask, because I'll confess, I'd never heard of ZAVA before this acquisition. We have an acquisition targets channel in the Discord, and I was scrolling up the day of the announcement, seeing if anyone had thrown out the name ZAVA as a candidate to be acquired, and no one had. And so I just want to get the sense from two people who are in Europe. Is this a company that people know? What's your sense for the brand recognition of ZAVA, for the countries that they operate in? Is this a market leader? Is it a niche player? How does ZAVA fit into the market in Europe?
Oh, in the UK, I hadn't heard of them before as well.
Okay.
No. So that's what leads me to believe the whole point of the acquisition is for the licenses to be able to provide telehealth services, and also the subscribers and the fleet of doctors and the expertise within those countries.
It's fascinating because they've been around 10 plus years. What about you, Matt?
Yeah.
No, what we have in Denmark in the private sector is if you want to have a sort of a higher expertise, a better experience, a shorter waiting time, that will be what you'll be buying, but that will mostly be surgeons or plastic surgery, stuff like that. So this is a new way of doing medicine. Actually, this customer-centric medicine, it's not been done. We've had alternative medicine, but not this sort of gray zone.
And I recall on the previous episode, Patrick and Jonathan, you were discussing how much Hims may have paid for ZAVA. I think they probably paid maybe 2 to 3 times sales. I think anything more than 5 would be too rich, because, as I said, they're not providing anything special. It's just medication that's made by other brands like Tiva and Accord. If you look at 2 other brands, I would advise subscribers and watchers to go to their website. These 2 are very similar to what Hims are doing in the UK. It's called Manual and Newman. I'll send it over in the group chat.
And I have to say, Sekander,
Yeah.
those 2 did make it into the acquisition
They
targets.
did.
Okay. Yeah.
People know about Newman and
Yeah.
Manual. I don't. Yeah, ZAVA was a new name for a lot of people, and I don't know. We may have revenues. I think we were speculating revenues are probably in the 40 to 50 million range. I think it just comes down to how explosive the weight loss business was in 2024. It could be higher than 40, 50 million.
I was actually able to work out ZAVA's margins as well, because I know exactly how much they pay for the medication they sell.
Great.
So their weight loss has around 34 to 40% gross margins. Their ED medication has really high gross margins, 90%. Contraceptives around 50 to 80%. Menopause and testosterone is around 50% margins.
Okay.
So I think you guys mentioned that their gross margin was around 70% in the last episode. So maybe it's skewed because they provide more ED or higher margin medication.
Patrick, you want to? I know that you have quite a lot to say on the topic of Novo Nordisk. I want to make sure that we fit that in. You want to go for it?
Sure. So this question is a little more forward-looking. It also happens to focus on Novo Nordisk. So I'm going to send it to you, Mads, the question. But prior, it's not a quick question because I want to lay some background. So if you bear with me for a minute or two, I want to give you a little background, which I think will be pretty interesting and useful to the listeners. So as Jonathan knows, I've shared this with him privately. I have this pet theory that this ZAVA acquisition did not just come out of nowhere. As we've been talking about, Hims has been in Britain for a little while. We talked a little bit about that. But I have not had the sense that international expansion was really much of a focus for this company until now. So my pet theory is that this sudden shift in strategy is at least partly due to its potential brewing partnership with Novo Nordisk, which has a heavy presence in Europe. They're in Europe. This is speculation, but I think that the deal may have helped spark the ZAVA acquisition, but there's more than that. Second, HIMSS has made a number of interesting acquisitions and investments over the past year that have been suggestive of a much more sophisticated product offering. To recap quickly, they bought a new peptide facility in California. This facility is directly related to some of the categories that HIMSS plans to expand into, including weight loss, of course. That's the big one, but also hormone replacement, longevity, sleep, and a few others that HIMSS has already said are in its immediate future. Longer term, peptides have more promise, including cancer, cognitive disease, regenerative medicine. A lot of that, if HIMSS were ever to get to it, would be further down the road. But these are areas of research and advancement when it comes to peptides. Separate acquisition is Tribe Labs, which will allow them to collect better patient data. And finally, they brought on a new chief technology officer who will be upgrading MedMatch, the internal data system, to better integrate with AI capability. Now, it turns out that all of these actions are consistent with a broader industry trend towards integrating AI in health. This is especially true with respect to peptides, where there's some very significant things are going on a personalized basis, but at a much higher level of technological sophistication than has traditionally been true of what HIMSS has done on personalization up till now. Now, all of this is very future-oriented, which is why I'm turning to you next on for an answer on this in a second, Mads. But we have to throw in a counterpoint. And the counterpoint is this. Despite these fairly significant for HIMSS investments, they're not big in terms of the industry. There are a lot of other companies out there that have been doing a lot of advanced work for a longer period of time in all of these areas that I just mentioned. They're more experienced, they're better capitalized, and so on. So I don't think that HIMSS is looking to compete with those companies. I think HIMSS is instead positioning itself to partner with some of them. And HIMSS, what the value add that HIMSS would play and bring to the table is that of being a, quote, front door to potentially millions of patients in its current network and potentially in Europe as well. So let me repeat that for emphasis. HIMSS could be positioning itself as a front door for truly advanced next generation personalized healthcare in both the US and internationally. That is a big step up from when it is commonly denigrated as being, a pill mill focused on ED. This is way different level of work that they may be focused on. And the last thing I'll mention, then I'm going to turn it back, or a couple of things I'll mention, is, well, if we're talking about partners, then we're not saying that HIMSS is actually going to do all of that stuff, the AI work itself, but it's going to partner with those that do. Well, as it turns out, one of the most obvious big players in all of this is Novo Nordisk itself. After all, both semaglutide and insulin, which are two of its main products, are both peptides. And Novo already has partnerships with big AI firms for drug development. So it has that in place. And what it needs, I think, is that front door to future patients in the US and in Europe. Last piece of this puzzle. We recently found out that Kerr Schultz, the former Novo executive, who's on HIMSS board and probably has been a go-between between the two companies, is considered to be probably one of the top two candidates to replace the outgoing Novo CEO. If Schultz was named as Novo's new CEO, that would strengthen the brewing relationship between the two companies even more. So to summarize, and here's the question in a second, 3 things. You've got a shift toward higher tech, AI-driven personalized care in peptides that HIMSS has been opening some doors to, at least with some of the acquisitions and hires. There are personal relationships between Novo and HIMSS. And there is this new expansion in Europe, which is what we're focused on mostly today with ZAVA. And Europe is a place where Novo is already quite strong. So here's the question for you, Mads. What do you think about this? You know a lot about data. You're in Denmark. What do you think about the Novo partnership? How do you think that might intersect with the ZAVA acquisition?
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you said about HIMSS and hers being the digitization of the value chain and enabling data to be collected in order to make personalized medicine. So around that platform, you should probably see a lot of new parties entering and being able to be partners. And you saw Amazon started with selling books. That was a 1P business, where the digital platform was a 1P business. That's how you start a digital platform. You have to create an offering in order to get customers, and then you get another group, and you might get a third group and a fourth group and a fifth group. And it's built around having a digital platform that collects the data and facilitates it in a new and better way than the old system did. And I think that HIMSS is just that. That is a digital rail for a better value chain that will be able to collect all the data. So you could see Novo as the first new partner in that category. Now they're partnering up with a legacy medicine company that wants to use them as a distribution partner, because that gives them access to some of the other user groups. And if you do the Amazon analogy, suddenly you'll have lots of different. Amazon has payments platforms. They just have a lot of user groups that come in around this, and Novo is the first one. I'm a tech investor, so I don't follow Novo that much, but I think that maybe Novo had to cave because of his Durham's the way he talked on the earnings calls. It was so clear that they were going to do the compounded drugs in these individual doses, etc. So Novo had to find a way in, and Novo, I felt they sort of lost to HIMSS in the States, and they had to do something to get the distribution. And yeah, so I think we'll see. This will be the start, and I think you should consider HIMSS evolving into a 3P platform, where they will be more facilitating a lot of different user groups coming together on this digital rail that enables user groups to get in contact with each other.
Forgive me, what is a 3P network?
Yeah, a 3P is a third person. So on Amazon, you have these other guys selling different stuff. And what you do, what a 3P platform does, is that if there's a product that needs to be on the platform, if nobody is selling frying pans on Amazon, Amazon will have to procure frying pans and place it on that. And that could be HIMSS role in the future, that they let other guys do sort of a lot of the work. New startups are more they think of new ways, so you need to let that into your ecosystem in order to grow more, and then you need to be a reliable partner. And Amazon stops competing when somebody comes in and does a great work of offering a great service for the customers.
Okay.
And so what you're saying effectively is that you take seriously the idea that HIMSS is going from being, a boner pill company to the Netflix or Amazon of healthcare, where they're sourcing drugs from all kinds of pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I don't want to, in Europe, sort of think of one model as the HIMSS and HERS model, but sort of think that they can have their own pharmacy in one country. They can procure it or cooperate with a pharmacy. So pharmacies could be a user group. Somebody could build a really, really new way of doing a pharmacy really effective and work together with HIMSS and HERS delivering their service. And you could see right now in the States, they have doctors on as a user group, but you could also, maybe you could have a country where HIMSS is just applying the app, and then you have a company delivering the doctors. That would be the nature of the 3P platform.
Got it. Hey, Jonathan, I know we're getting up against the end of the hour, so I'm going to let you manage our time. Do you want me to ask one last question on these partnerships in Britain and let you take the rest?
Well, I was about to chime in. What's the Mads and Sekander? What is your schedule looking like? Because we're 3 minutes from the end of the hour.
I could do another 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm okay as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then. Yeah.
All right, quick question, and then I'm going
Patrick,
to turn
and
it to
then
you,
I'll take it
Jonathan.
home.
You can handle the rest. So, given time limitations, Sekander, we'll make this one quick. ZAVA has its own partnerships. We were just talking about partnership potentially with Novo. ZAVA has its own partnerships. In Britain, they have two major partnerships with two big pharmacies that I bet you know pretty well, Superdrug and Asda. That's interesting. I have no idea how Hims would manage that relationship because that's not something they do right now. In a minute or two, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Hims will carry on with those relationships because Hims's business model was about having high margin products, personalized, customized medication. So yeah, I don't think that's much use to Hims.
Right. All right. Well, that's the short answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
Kicking it back to you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take it home and look ahead to the future. I want to think about how we should evaluate the acquisition in 12 months. Let's fast forward to 2026, maybe summer 2026. What are the KPIs that each of you are going to be looking at to judge whether the acquisition of ZAVA has been successful? I'll start with you, Sekander.
I'll be looking at if Hims has got their website set up in these relative countries, so Germany, France, Ireland, they're already in the UK, and if they've got one for Hims and one for her separately, and if they're already selling compounded medications, that would be, I think, in a year's time, that is doable.
Got it. And you think it's likely that we have, I guess, 4 separate websites, maybe even 8 if they decide to port hers over to Europe as well. I don't know what the plans are, but individual websites for each country.
Exactly.
Okay. What about you, Mads?
Yeah, I think what you shouldn't see as a failure is that they launch something and decides to take it down or end up in a blind road. I think they'll have to do a lot of trial and error to figure out the right way to evolve in each of the different countries. So, and doing that takes testing and doing stuff. I don't know. Some of the listeners might be familiar with C Limited, which is the Asian e-commerce platform. Now, back in 2020, in the heydays, they launched platforms in Poland, I think they were in Spain, they were in Mexico, they were in Brazil, and they were in so many countries. They have a really asset-light model. They just did cross-border shipping. They made a website, and then they were going in those countries. They took it down in every country but one, and that's Brazil, and that's a huge market for them right now. So if Hims can do the same thing in Europe, do a lot of failures, and but then eventually get a foothold in Britain, get a foothold in another country, and build from there, that would be a reasonable success.
It's an interesting segue to what I wanted to ask about with Canada. Now, from my understanding, Ozempic is off patent in Canada in 2026. I know we've talked a lot about Europe in this episode, but just real quickly on Canada, is that a market, in either of your opinions, that Hims should want to enter?
I think for sure they should enter into Canada, but this all comes down to like Hims isn't a GLP-1 story. I think they'll do really well in the other segments as well. And if GLP-1s is off patent, then that's a benefit for them as well.
I mean, what GLP-1 taught us about Hims and about Durham is that he's really opportunistic, and that whenever he gets a shot at something that can move the company, then he'll take it. And just being in Europe and having the rails will give them that opportunity.
And I'm actually more excited. I know everyone talks about GLP-1s because it's all over the news and everyone knows about it. But I'm more excited about the menopause and hormone replacement therapy that Hims will get into, because I believe they're way higher margins. Because we all know if Hims are selling these branded GLP-1s, it's going to be not as high margins as their other products.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So to take us home, I want to think about the future of medicine. Now, in the US, there's massive and growing excitement around the next wave of healthcare. Stuff like testosterone, peptides, as you said, HIMSS may get into menopause. That's not exactly cutting edge, but still possibly on the roadmap, or certainly on the roadmap. Bio-age testing and other personalized protocols. We just had the founder of a company called Superpower on the podcast, Max Marchioni, talking about what his company is doing around lab testing, blood work, preventative medicines. Now, I just want to ask you before we wrap, what is most exciting to each of you about the future of healthcare? There are certain things at the frontier of medicine that patients swear by, but are still largely ignored and dismissed. Testosterone, peptides. Sekander, what fires you up? What are you going to be watching for that HIMSS may offer in the next year or two?
I believe the future of healthcare comes down to personalization, because if HIMSS is able to combine these different medications that already exist in the market, and they're able to combine into one medication, then it will increase adherence, and it will make it more affordable for patients as well. Rather than having to take multiple different medication, they just take one. And if it's in a spray form or lozenge form, in the form that the patient prefers to take, I think that's something that I could visualize already. With peptides, I'm not too sure, but with that stuff, I think HIMSS will make it more affordable to the masses. It is available already, but it's too expensive for the masses.
And we'll close with you, Mads. How are you thinking about the future?
Yeah, I think that AI in personalizing medicine will be really good. You know, when I sit with a patient, I have 2 or 3 different drugs I can use for his treatment, and it will be my guess which drug fits this patient the best. And for each individual disease, I may see a couple of patients a week, and over a lifetime, not so many patients. But the HIMSS platform will see like hundreds of thousands of these patients. So that platform will be able to give a suggestion for me as a GP that maybe this drug will be the right for this patient. And that could be because he's from Kentucky, or because of the tone of his voice, or what we know of his wife or his dog, or we don't know. Or it could be something geographical, and then put into that what happens with AI and gene mapping, etc. So I think we'll be able to treat so much more effective once we combine what AI can do with gene mapping, and then all the data that HIMSS will be able to harvest in the future and apply. And that's what we talked about with this new modern rail for healthcare, where you're actually able to gather all of these data and apply it in a clinical setting. HIMSS will enable that, and that's why it could be the future of healthcare.
Great. I'll just say before we close, it was Sunday yesterday, Patrick called me up, and we spent the first 15 or 20 minutes talking about the possibility of drugs built for each of our DNAs.
Yeah.
And whether HIMSS will play a role in that future of medicine. So thanks for mentioning that, Mads. And all I can say is that we will have a lot more on that topic in the coming weeks and months. This has been episode 35 of HIMSS House. Mads, Sekander, thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks.